Fascism is really rolling across the country, the world, actually. When you stop and think about the United States, what's happening here by the fascist devils who identify with the Republican Party, when you think about the just defeated Bolsonaro in Brazil and what will happen in that country, when you think about the Philippines, when you think about Russia, when you think about Iran, and now we have Israel. You know, I mentioned last week that what was happening in Israel with the return of Netanyahu and his attempt to establish himself as the dictator of Israel bore some focus, and I just never got to it. Well, I'm to it now. Last week, what got my attention was the fact that tens of thousands of Israelis who were maybe you saw the pictures. Everywhere you looked was this Star of David flag. They were waving the flags, blowing on horns, chanting democracy. Israelis chanting democracy. They were also chanting no to dictatorship. I think something that we in America who are not Jews don't understand. So many people who have gone to Israel to live there come from countries where dictatorship was the order of the day. But I digress. This huge protest was occurring outside the Parliament building in Jerusalem, as inside the newly acceded to power again, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is nothing but a criminal and a fascist, he was formally launching his plan to change Israel's legal system, to change it in the way that Mr. Netanyahu has control. Netanyahu is no different from Trump, except he's 1,000 times smarter than Trump. Of course, your average alley cat is 1,000 times more smarter than Trump. But Netanyahu is an educated man, and he is also a fascist dictator wannabe. This was what occurred in front of the Knesset, the parliament in Jerusalem. It was the largest protest outside in the street in years. And according to Time magazine, it reflected the deep divisions over what Netanyahu is trying to do. Now, let me mention for a moment, the article I'm about to share with you in Time magazine is highly critical of Israel. And I don't want you to think it's written by some anti-Semite. The person who wrote this is a man named Ilan Ben Zion. Okay? Ilan Ben Zion. I don't think he is anti-Semitic. But let me go on. The changes that Netanyahu is going to put in place, or is putting in place, to that country's judicial system has triggered weeks of these massive demonstrations. It's also gotten lots of protests from influential business leaders in that country, former military men in Israel, and even gotten a statement of concern from Joe Biden. But, despite a plea from Israel's president, and the presidency in Israel is strictly ceremonial, it's like the King of England, ceremonial, figurehead, means nothing. But the figurehead president of Israel asked the legislature, or asked Netanyahu to put this legislation that he's ramming through the Knesset on hold. The president of the country did. But not to happen. Netanyahu's allies, and let me mention who his allies are in the Israeli parliament. They are the religious far right, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, and ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel would make ultra-Orthodox Jews in this country look like a bunch of goddamn liberals. But just like Trump, just like Putin, just like, what's his name, Orban, just like Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey, these dictatorial leaders, these fascist wannabes, always align themselves with and are members themselves of the dominant religious force within their countries. What Putin has done to the Christian church in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church, is very similar to what Netanyahu is doing to the ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel, what Orban has done to the Orthodox Christians in his country. I mean, it just goes on and on. Religious fascism is the sort of fascism that encourages you to soak the ground with the blood of your enemy. No hold barred, no mercy given. But I digress. The legislation that Netanyahu is proposing, I believe it was in front of the Knesset last week and possibly this week too, for a series of votes. This battle between the fascist dictator wannabe, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Israelis, the Israeli government members, parliament members who are not fascist. We may disagree. I may disagree with so much of what Israel does where it concerns their Palestinian cousins, but that's not what this is about. Although I have to say that when you treat people with whom you're going to have to live, the way the Israelis have treated the Palestinians, it's no wonder this kind of fascism starts to rise. Look what's happened in this country. Look what's happened in Russia. I mean, the patterns don't change. Anyway, the main opposition leader of what Netanyahu is trying to do is a parliamentarian or a Knesset member named Yair Lapid. And he said, quote, during this demonstration, I believe he's a member of the Knesset, he said, quote, "They hear our cry," referring to Netanyahu and his Nazis. "They hear the strong voice of truth. They hear it and they are afraid." End quote. Opposition leader Lapid. Now, the story that Netanyahu is putting out there is the same that any wannabe fascist dictator puts out. Just like Putin, just like Orban, just like all of these bastards, just like Trump. Netanyahu and his supporters say that the changes he's trying to put into effect are needed to rein in a judiciary that has too much power. And in Israel, that's just simply not the case. His critics, Netanyahu's critics, say this judicial overhaul bullshit is a coup and will destroy Israeli democracy. The patterns are exactly the same. And Netanyahu is also in the middle of being on trial for a series of corruption charges, just like Trump, just like Putin, if they could ever nail that war criminal bastard down. And because of that, the critics say that Netanyahu has a conflict of interest. Well, no shit. Eventually, his case, if it proceeds, will have to work its way before the Israeli Supreme Court. Look what Trump did to the American Supreme Court, hoping that when his criminal acts are finally argued before the Supreme Court, that the people he appointed would exonerate him, which so far hasn't completely happened. But the Israeli Supreme Court is different from ours. But let me proceed. The people who were protesting out in front of the Knesset last week were from all over Israel. They were not just residents of Jerusalem. And the organizers of that protest said that over 100,000 people were in attendance. And among those addressing the crowd were female LGBTQ activists, leaders of the opposition parties, liberals, the same people who, until Putin ordered them arrested, were addressing crowds in Russia. The same people who were addressing crowds in Turkey. The same people addressing crowds in the Philippines and in the United States. When these fascists begin their move to power, They go after LGBTQ groups. In some countries, Jews. In other countries, liberals, activists. In other countries, Muslims, Hindus. And according to Ilan Ben Zion, thousands of people arrived in Jerusalem for this demonstration. They came on packed trains. When they got off the trains and came up out of the subways on the escalators in that city, they were chanting democracy. They were cheering and whistling, waving the Star of David. And then hundreds of others gathered in protest at one of the holiest sites in Judaism, and that's the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Did I just say that? I think I just said that. The Western Wall. Okay, the holiest site where Jews can pray, where Jews can beg their God for understanding, to make atone, to make amends, to place in the walls a prayer request, a blessing request, whatever. And then they marched toward the Knesset. And while they were marching and while they were demonstrating outside, inside, opposition lawmakers, opposition to the Nazi Netanyahu, were yelling. In so many parliaments around the world, it's not like ours, where when you have a bunch of scum, a sewer rat like Marjorie Taylor Greene scream out liar, and everybody goes ooh. That is just not even noticeable in parliaments around the globe. Trust me. But in the Israeli parliament, while this was going on last week, opposition lawmakers vocally, I like the way Ben Zion puts it, vocally protested Netanyahu's reform. Vocally protested, you can only imagine. And the reform was to judge appointments ahead of a committee vote that could send the bill to the full parliament, for a vote by the full parliament to see what would happen. And during a really unruly session where it just stopped just short of fisticuffs, according to what I read here, members of the opposition stood up on conference tables and shouted as a key Netanyahu ally tried to hold the vote. The motions passed anyway in a 9-7 committee vote. 9-7 in favor of Netanyahu's fascism. Now, it should be said that those 9 votes, you and I don't know how many of them came from the ultra-Orthodox religious parties with whom Netanyahu formed this god-awful alliance so he could be prime minister again, just like McCarthy did in this country. The ungodly alliance he formed with the Christian Nazis in order for him to be Speaker of the House. This is a common way that religious fascists do it. Whether it's Israel, the United States, Russia, Turkey, the Philippines, it doesn't make any difference. Align yourself with the religion. So, tens of thousands of people marched on the Knesset a day after that country's the figurehead president, the guy I mentioned, urged Netanyahu's government not to do this, delay these changes to that country's judiciary. And the critics within Israel say that what Netanyahu is doing will weaken the country's Supreme Court and erode democratic checks and balances. Of course it will, but that's the whole idea. This is what Trump tried here. This is what the Supreme Court has drifted towards here. And there is no Supreme Court in Russia. It's all run by Putin, everything. A lot of these protesters carrying the Israeli flag were screaming about what they saw as an attack on Israel's democratic institutions. They were chanting, shame, shame. They were also chanting this, Israel will not be a dictatorship. I mean, does this sound familiar? Of course it does. One of the demonstrators in Jerusalem, quoted here by Ben Zion, a guy named Boaz Zarki, said, quote, "The people won't have it. The separation of authority is critical to the existence of democracy, and we need to do everything in our power to prevent these changes from passing," end quote. You see, in so many countries, not the United States anymore, I'm sorry to say, not Russia, because the Russian people have never lived in democracy. Never. The closest they came to it was when, what's his name? You know who I'm talking about. The one that came up with glasnost and blah, blah, blah. Come on, Mike, damn. The last effective premier of Russia, I'm trying to blank on his name, not Yeltsin, the other guy. But anyway, people in these countries where democracy is holding on by its fingernails, those people take democratic principles, separation of powers, an independent judiciary, a free press, a lot more seriously than we do in this country. I'm not saying that we in this country are a bunch of assholes, although a lot of us are. It's just we don't pay attention because we feel like we've always had it. That's how we were set up. Well, a lot of these, Israel was set up as a democratic country. But slowly, surely, since 1948, they haven't been around that long, since 1948, not the modern state of Israel. Since 1948, the efforts to erode and eventually destroy democratic principles in Israel have proceeded apace. They just keep going. And then you get somebody like Netanyahu. At a joint press conference at the Knesset, the former defense minister of Israel, Benny Gantz, said that the opposition party leaders, in opposition to Netanyahu, were united, quote, against the targeted assassination of democracy. Do you get that? The targeted assassination of democracy. Who has targeted it? Huh? Who is the assassin? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.